He was walking past the school when it happened. Sylvester Stallone, dressed casually trying to enjoy a quiet day in Texas, stopped in his tracks. Across the street, a man in handcuffs, gray-haired, flannel shirt, face calm and proud, was being arrested in front of a group of stunned children. The man didn't resist, didn't shout, but something in the way he stood, something in his eyes. It stopped Stallone cold, because he recognized him, not from a movie, not from a news story, but from the battlefield 20 years ago, and what Stallone did next would shake the entire country. Before we dive into this powerful true story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy stories of courage, justice, and redemption, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. we have another unforgettable story waiting for you. He wasn't wearing a uniform when it happened. Just a faded flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, dirt caked beneath his fingernails from the schoolyard garden he'd been tending all morning. Michael Torres, 58, moved slower these days. Bad knee, fused shoulder, and a bullet fragment still embedded in his ribs from a war most people barely remembered. But what was burned into the town's memory that afternoon wasn't his limp. It was the sound of the sheriff's voice, loud, final. "Turn around, Michael, hands behind your head." The playground fell silent. A soccer ball rolled to a stop near a stunned child. Michael's eyes scanned the horizon like he used to scan for tripwires in Afghanistan, measured, instinctive. But he obeyed, calmly, quietly, because if there was one thing Michael had learned over the years, it was this: sometimes the truth doesn't matter, not in places like Fairview. But Michael wasn't just another forgotten veteran. What nobody in that crowd knew, what even Michael himself had never told a soul, was that 20 years ago, in the middle of a firefight on the edge of Kandahar, he had pulled a young embedded journalist to safety. That journalist would go on to interview world leaders, win Pulitzers, and eventually befriend Sylvester Stallone. And therefore, when Stallone stumbled on a viral clip showing Michael's quiet arrest, the veteran being handcuffed in front of stunned kids, something inside him cracked wide open. He recognized the man, not by name, but by the way he stood, by the way he refused to flinch. Fairview wasn't a place that liked. It was a town stitched together by silence, by pride, and by a dusty kind of memory that didn't always remember. The sheriff, Warren Claiborne, had been re-elected 3 times without opposition. His father had held the post before him. And his son, Brett, the one with a smirk too big for his badge, was already working nights at the department, wearing a gun he didn't yet deserve. The Claiborne name meant order, authority, and the charge against Michael was as sharp as it was unbelievable: possession of illegal firearms with intent to distribute. But in the sheriff's office, truth was less about evidence and more about info. They'd found a duffel bag in the trunk of his old truck, military-grade weapons, serial numbers scratched off, and a crumpled envelope with cartel codes no one could quite explain. Michael didn't resist, didn't shout, didn't beg. He just whispered, "I've never touched that bag before in my life," but they didn't believe him. Therefore, they locked him in a holding cell so cold his joints screamed all night. Jessica Miller had never defended a veteran before. She was 32, 2 years out of law school, and new to Fairview. People didn't smile at her in the grocery store, didn't wave when she jogged by. She was a city girl, and everyone could smell it. But the case file on her desk that morning was unlike anything she'd seen. Michael's military records read like a movie script: 3 tours, 7 commendations, 1 Medal of Valor, and still no family. No friends listed, no complaints ever filed. Just silence. That's what drew her in. Not the drama, not the challenge, the silence. She met Michael behind bulletproof glass on a Tuesday. He looked straight at her and said, "I don't want mercy, Ms. Miller. I just want the truth to come out." She nodded, and then made the first promise of her career she wasn't sure she could keep. "I'll find it." Meanwhile, Stallone was sitting in a leather chair inside a Hollywood editing suite when he saw the clip. Someone had tagged him in a comment on a veteran support page. The man being arrested looked older, slower, worn. But there was something about his eyes, something Stallone recognized from a foxhole 20 years ago. And the memory hit him like a gut punch. That journalist that night, the man who dragged him out through the smoke and screams, that man was this man. He stood up, left the studio, and by the end of the day, the hashtag #DoshkaFreeMichaelTorres had 17,000 retweets. Back in Fairview, the sheriff leaned back in his leather chair and frowned at the phone lighting up on his desk. He hadn't expected national attention. He especially hadn't expected Stallone. But Warren Claiborne had a bigger problem, because the duffel bag they found, it hadn't come from Michael's truck. It had come from Brett's. And Brett had secrets. But exposing that truth would unravel decades of silence in Fairview. Therefore, Sheriff Claiborne doubled down. He called in favors, filed new charges, declared Michael a flight risk, and denied him bail. Jessica was drowning. Witnesses wouldn't talk. Security footage from the parking lot had been accidentally erased. The weapons had no prints. The envelope's codes couldn't be traced. Everywhere she turned, a door slammed shut. But then came the letter, unmarked envelope, no return address, inside a single photo. Michael, 20 years younger, pulling a bleeding man through a bombed-out hallway. The man in the photo, a young journalist, a face Jessica had seen on the news 1,000 times. The caption written on the back, "He saved me. You owe him more than silence." KB Stallone went live on Instagram that night. He didn't start with fanfare, didn't mention movies or fame. He simply said, "There's a man rotting in a jail cell in Texas, a hero, a ghost, and I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for him." The video hit 12 million views in 48 hours. Jessica's office line rang nonstop. Veterans began marching outside the Fairview courthouse. Reporters flew in, and Stallone announced he was flying to Fairview himself. But as his plane touched down, a fire broke out in the evidence room at the sheriff's office. Files burned. The duffel bag? Gone. So was the only witness Stallone remembered from the past. Michael sat on the edge of his cot, listening to the chaos echo through the jail like distant artillery. He felt it deep in his bones, the kind of trouble that wasn't loud but lethal. And then the jail cell opened, not with a key, but with a whisper. "Get up," someone said. Michael looked up. It was Brett, with a gun in one hand and a trembling voice. "You shouldn't be here," Brett muttered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." The hallway was empty. The air was thick with smoke from the fire, and Brett reached into his pocket. Brett's hand trembled like it didn't belong to him. He didn't look like a man holding a gun. He looked like a boy who'd just realized the world was bigger than the lie he'd grown up in. His finger hovered above the trigger, and the hallway behind him flickered with smoke and red alarm lights. Michael didn't move. He wasn't afraid, not of guns, not of confused kids with last names that carried too much power. He just tilted his head and said calmly, "You came to finish it?" Brett swallowed hard. "No, I came to end it." He tossed something on the cot, an old flash drive, wrapped in a red bandana. "Everything's on there. The truth, the drop site, my prints. I was supposed to just store the bag. I didn't know Dad was going to use you." Michael stared at him, eyes like stone. "And now?" "I don't know," Brett whispered. "I thought, if I helped you get out, maybe I'd fix it. But I'm not even sure what's fixable anymore." Michael picked up the flash drive and studied the bandana. It wasn't military issue. It was from a school fundraiser, the same fundraiser where Brett had sat in the crowd while Michael dug a memorial garden. He'd smiled that day, even thanked Michael. Now, he looked ready to shatter. But before Michael could speak, two sharp voices echoed from the stairwell. "Down this hallway! Go!" Flashlights danced across the smoke. Brett panicked, shoving Michael back into the cell and slamming the door. "Stay here. Don't say a word. This never happened." And he vanished. Jessica knew something had shifted when she saw Michael the next morning. He looked different, more alert, less tired. There was something in his posture, like the gravity around him had tilted. "You slept?" she asked. "A little." She sat, opened her folder, and slid a copy of the photograph across the glass. Kevin Brooks's face was circled. Michael's jaw clenched. "I saved that man." Jessica nodded. "He's missing." Michael didn't blink. Then he scared. But there was something else. Something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. A weight. "There's more you're not telling me." Michael glanced around, then whispered, "I need to trust you. Can I?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." He slid the flash drive under the glass. "What is this?" she asked. "Proof of everything." Jessica's hands trembled as she took it. This wasn't just evidence. This was the key. Meanwhile, in the town square, a storm was building. The media circus had fully arrived. News trucks lined the streets. Protesters held signs. Veterans in uniform handed out flyers about Michael's service. And in the middle of it all, standing on the courthouse steps in a black coat and gray scarf, was Sylvester Stallone. He didn't speak with anger. He didn't raise his voice. He just told the truth. "I was rescued by a ghost, a man whose name I didn't even know until a few days ago. But what I do know is this: I owe him my life. And right now, this town owes him justice." His words echoed like thunder through the plaza. Inside, Sheriff Claiborne watched the TV screen with dead eyes. "Shut it down," he growled. "But the press—" "I said shut it down." He turned away from the screen and picked up his phone. Time for damage control. That night, Jessica plugged the flash drive into her laptop. Audio recordings, emails, GPS logs, a paper trail that didn't just implicate Brett, but the sheriff himself. It wasn't just evidence of a frame job. It was a smuggling ring. Claiborne had been using Michael's old truck, parked outside the school every day, to run drops between a contact in Mexico and a local militia cell. Michael, the perfect fall guy, alone, silent, and invisible. She pressed play on one of the videos, a conversation, grainy but clear. "Brett, you sure Torres won't check the trunk?" Claiborne, "He's too damn proud and too damn blind." Jessica's blood ran cold. This wasn't small-town corruption. This was betrayal on a national level. Kevin Brooks was alive. But Stallone tracked him down in a safe house in New Mexico using contacts from his documentary crew. Kevin answered the door with a shotgun in his hand and a look of guilt smeared across his soul. "I said I'd never talk about that night again." "You don't have to," Stallone said. "Just tell the truth." Kevin stared at the TV behind Stallone. It showed Michael's mugshot. Underneath, "War, hero, or criminal?" "I owe him everything," Kevin whispered. But he hesitated. "I saw Claiborne years ago in Kabul. He was running something dark back then, too, and when I came home I got a call. One warning: stay quiet or lose everything." Therefore, he disappeared. Now, he wasn't sure if talking would save Michael or get them both killed. Back in Fairview, Brett was spiraling. He hadn't shown up for his shift. His car was found at the edge of the old bridge. His badge lay on the seat. Claiborne snapped, "You find my son? You bring him home. Now." Deputies fanned out. Stallone stayed in town. Jessica filed a petition to present the flash drive in federal court. And Michael? Michael sat alone, staring at a picture of the garden he'd planted, one rose bush for every man he'd lost in combat. 13 bushes, 13 names. And now maybe his own. That night, Stallone met Jessica in a diner at the edge of town. No cameras, no press. Just two people trying to untangle a knot of silence. "Why are you still here?" she asked. Stallone didn't answer right away. Then he said, because I can't keep playing heroes on screen and ignoring the real ones off of it." Jessica watched him for a moment. "You know you're putting yourself in danger." "I know," he said, "but that man saved my life. I'm just giving him the chance to live his." The next morning, news broke. A body had been pulled from the river beneath the bridge. Male. Early 20s, no ID matching Brett's description. Sheriff Claiborne collapsed in his office, and across town, Michael's cell door opened again. This time, it was Jessica. "You're being transferred," she said. "To where?" She smiled faintly. "Federal custody, out of Claiborne's reach." Michael stood, but something in him sagged. "Brett's dead, isn't he?" Jessica didn't answer. She didn't have to. Michael nodded once and walked out of the cell. But as he passed through the corridor, a guard stopped him. "There's someone here to see you." Michael turned and saw Stallone standing at the end of the hallway. Same eyes, same weight in his shoulders. They didn't speak, not at first. Then Stallone said quietly, "You still remember Kabul?" "I remember everything." The river didn't give up its secrets easily. The body found beneath the bridge was swollen, unrecognizable. No fingerprints, no wallet, no confirmation. Just a sheriff's grief and a town clinging to assumption. Sheriff Claiborne called a press conference. He stood in front of cameras with his sleeves rolled up and eyes full of controlled rage. "My son is gone," he said, voice cracking. "And this is what happens when outsiders meddle in things they don't He didn't say Stallone's name. He didn't have to. But that same night, an autopsy revealed something the sheriff hadn't expected. The man in the river didn't match Brett's dental records. It wasn't him, but Claiborne couldn't take it back now. Therefore, he doubled down again, issuing warrants, blocking transfers, and accusing Jessica of tampering with evidence. Fairview was burning, and at the center of the fire, Michael Torres, calm. Stallone sat in a borrowed trailer parked outside the courthouse, the curtains drawn, the laptop open. Across the screen, video files from the flash drive, and one folder labeled Kandahar, 2005. He clicked. Inside, a series of blurry images. One frame showed a man, young, bearded, limping, dragging someone through smoke. Stallone leaned in. It was him. It was the moment, captured on a shaky camera by a soldier who hadn't survived the night. His hands trembled. He hadn't remembered the face. But now he saw it clearly. Michael, covered in blood, yelling over not for help, but for someone else to run. Stallone's eyes burned. He'd built a life on playing warriors, but he had only ever met one, and Fairview was trying to bury him. Jessica received a call at 2:07 a.m., blocked number, a raspy voice. "You're not safe. The sheriff's cleaning house, and if he thinks you'll testify, you're next." Before she could reply, the call ended. She drove straight to Stallone's trailer. He opened the door in a hoodie and sweatpants, as if expecting her. "Someone's watching my apartment. I don't know who I can trust." Stallone poured her coffee, then slid a manila folder across the table. "What's this?" "My contacts ran the flash drive. There's a second set of files you missed. Hidden partition." Jessica opened it. Her eyes widened. Phone logs, wire transfers, private messages between Claiborne and a U.S. senator's aide. This wasn't just local corruption, it was federal. Meanwhile, Michael had been moved again, this time to a federal holding facility 2 hours outside of Fairview. His cell was cleaner, quieter, but the silence was heavier. He received a note that morning. No envelope, just a folded slip of paper delivered with his breakfast tray. The man in the river wasn't Brett, and Brett has something to. Michael closed his eyes. So the boy wasn't dead, but he was running. From what? From his father? From him? Brett resurfaced in Arizona. He showed up at a veterans center in Flagstaff asking to speak to the media. His face was sunken, beard grown wild, but his voice was steady. "I framed Michael Torres," he said into the camera. My father made me do it. I planted the bag, I erased the footage, and I lied because I was scared of the man who raised me. The clips spread like wildfire. CNN, MSNBC, Twitter, Facebook. Justice for Michael climbed a surplutu worldwide. Sheriff Claiborne saw it during a breakfast meeting with donors. His hands froze around his fork. "Get him silenced," he snapped. "Now!" But the system was no longer his. Therefore, federal marshals arrived at his office before noon, and Jessica got the call she'd been waiting for. "Prepare your client. He's being released for testimony." Michael stepped out of federal custody into a private car. Jessica was waiting with coffee and a new shirt. He smiled at her for the first time. "You still believe in me?" She laughed softly. "I believe in evidence, and in men who don't flinch under pressure." He looked out the window as the car moved through dry fields and quiet towns. "Where are we going?" "To Washington," she said. "They want your statement." Michael nodded. "But first," she hesitated, "there's someone who wants to see you." The car turned, and there, standing in front of a chapel near the state line, was Stallone. He looked older in daylight, more human. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Stallone pulled something from his coat pocket. A medal, tarnished, dent on the edge. "I found this in a box years ago. It had no name, just a year, 2005, Kandahar." He handed it to Michael. "It's yours." Michael took it. His fingers closed around the cold metal. And then Stallone added, "I kept it because it reminded me who I wanted to be, but you lived it." The Senate hearing room was packed. Jessica sat beside Michael at the long table, Stallone behind them. Kevin Brooks, too, finally stepping into the light. Flashbulbs, murmurs, tension. Michael's statement was quiet, measured, no theatrics. He spoke of honor, of silence, of being invisible in a country he nearly died for. And then he said something no one expected. "I forgive Brett Claiborne." The room went still. Jessica blinked. Stallone leaned forward slightly. "I forgive him," Michael repeated, "because someone once told me you either pass on your wounds or you heal them." He looked straight at the camera. "I've carried enough wounds." That night, Sheriff Claiborne was arrested on multiple federal charges. His empire crumbled. And Brett, under witness protection, was relocated out of state, but not before writing Michael a letter. It simply said, "Thank you for not becoming the man my father said you were." Back in Fairview, the school garden was overgrown, but one morning, kids arrived to find someone trimming the roses. No cameras, no fanfare. Just a man on one knee, sleeves rolled up, dirt under his nails, planting again. The roses were in bloom again. Not perfect, some thorns too sharp, a few petals curled at the edges, but they were alive. And that was enough. Michael stood among them in a worn flannel shirt and thick gloves, hands deep in the soil. Around him, children whispered and watched. One little boy pointed and asked his teacher, "Is he the man from the news?" The teacher just smiled. "No. He's the man who made this garden grow." Michael didn't respond. He didn't need to. Some legacies bloom quietly. A month had passed since the hearing in D.C. Sheriff Claiborne had been denied bail. New charges emerged weekly: arms trafficking, money laundering, obstruction of justice. His empire had collapsed under the weight of its own silence. Brett remained under protection, working at a veteran outreach clinic in Utah under a new name. He sent Michael a photo once, a small cactus in a clay pot with a note taped to it. Trying to grow things now, too. Michael pinned it above his sink. Jessica returned to the city. Her name started showing up in legal journals. Invitations came, offers, but she turned most of them down. One night she called Michael. "Still planting?" "Always," he said. "I think I finally understand why." Michael didn't answer. Some things are better learned in silence. Stallone flew back to Los Angeles after the storm settled. but something in him stayed behind. He still woke at 5:30, still walked the hills, but now he carried something different. Not guilt, not even pride, just clarity. He began working on a new film, not about boxers or mercenaries, but about a man in a garden, a man the world nearly forgot, a man who forgave before he was ever freed. His producers raised eyebrows. "This won't sell." He shrugged. "Then we give it away." Months passed. Seasons shifted. The garden at Fairview Elementary flourished. Parents took pictures near the plaques. Veterans came on Sundays just to walk through the rows. And every Friday, Michael returned. He didn't speak much, just pulled weeds, trimmed stems, and left behind a new rose for every name he remembered. Until one day, he brought a plaque of his own. No fanfare, no announcement. He knelt by the 13th bush, the one he'd always avoided, and placed it there. For those who saved others by simply standing tall. Below the inscription, a small carving. A man stands in handcuffs, but his eyes are unbroken. On the one-year anniversary of Michael's release, Fairview held a ceremony. It wasn't Michael's idea, it was the town's. People who once crossed the street to avoid him now lined up to shake his hand. Children who had watched him be arrested now wore buttons with his name. The mayor called him an example of quiet courage. Michael barely said a word, but when they asked him to say something, just one thing to mark the occasion, he stepped up to the microphone, cleared his throat, and said, "I used to believe being invisible kept me safe, but sometimes being seen is the only way to be free." The crowd stood in silence. Then one child began to clap, then another, until the whole square echoed with applause. Stallone watched from the back, arms crossed, eyes glassy. He turned to leave. But Michael caught him in the crowd. He raised a hand and mouthed, "Thank you." Later that evening, as the sun set over the hills behind Fairview, Michael returned to the garden alone. He took off his gloves, let the dirt cling to his skin. Then he knelt at the 13th bush and added a 14th. This one didn't represent death. It represented a man who lived. He pressed the soil down gently and whispered, "You were just a kid. But something in your eyes told me you'd do the right thing." And the wind carried it away. He wasn't wearing a uniform when it happened, just a flannel shirt and the kind of dignity you can't fake. And this time, the world finally saw it.